Welcome to Morning Java. I'm Dale Lolley here with Matt Grubba today, and Matt, we're a couple days removed now from the complete utter
disappointment
from the Penguins getting knocked out of the playoffs. It just goes to show you that just like that, it can be over. There's obviously been some fallout from everything that happened. We're starting to hear about some injuries trickling out and that kind of news coming out of the Penguins, which is typical.
Right.
But what's your takeaway now, a full 24 hours after the fact?
Well, I think after the initial shock, anger, the lashing out you saw, social media, people upset, I get the sense, and I think saner heads, cooler heads are prevailing, and that people are realizing, hey, this is a Penguins team that played 300 and some games over the last 3 seasons. They were up against a good Washington team that, let's not forget, for the last 2 seasons finished ahead of them in the regular season standing. So it's not like Washington any slouch. Eventually it's going to come around to get you at some point. And I mean, it hurts to lose, of course, but you can't win it every year. There's 30 teams in that league trying to win the cup every year. More than 30 now. I keep forgetting we're adding teams.
I'll buy that more than I'll buy the they played 300 games in 900 days excuse. That's an excuse. You're making it just like the injuries are an excuse. If you're on the ice and playing, you're healthy enough to play. Yeah. It's just like the Steelers' defensive line in the Jacksonville game. Yes, they were banged up, but they were in the game playing. That doesn't excuse them getting pushed around by the Jaguars in that game. It doesn't excuse the Penguins losing that series. The fatigue issue is a complete excuse. Of the guys on the roster, how many of them actually played all 300 of those games? 2? Sidney Crosby and I don't know who else.
Kessel.
That would be about it. That would be it. Malcolm missed time, Murray missed time. You can go on down the list. Some of the guys weren't here. There was a lot of turnover on that roster. They got beat. It's okay to say that they lost a series. You can't win every year, as you said.
Yeah, the only reason I give the fatigue some credence, and you also have to remember some of these guys are also getting in games with their national teams during the different breaks.
The Capitals had guys that did that too, though.
They do, but you shorten up the bench the way they do in the playoffs too, and maybe that's something that some coaches probably shouldn't do, but you're putting more and more minutes on these guys who are, the relied upon go-to players for year after year in a deep run. I can see it a little bit, but like you said, if they're healthy enough to get out there, or maybe they need to manage them better in the regular season and not give them so many games.
Beat them up, yeah.
I mean, go to the NBA, look at the San Antonio Spurs success for all those years. People yelled at Greg Popovich for resting the Tim Duncans of the world, but that worked out pretty well for him in the long term.
And I think the other thing is as well, and we talked about this at the trade deadline when they didn't go out and get an extra defenseman.
Yeah.
I think that played a factor in this series. You had your defenseman out there, basically, as you mentioned, cut down the bench a little bit, and you're playing your last line defenseman, 10 minutes a game. If you had improved that a little bit more, as opposed to just adding another scoring forward, maybe you would have been better off in the long run.
Possibly.
Matt, we've seen Jeff Capel make some interesting moves thus far as the new head coach of the Pitt Panthers men's basketball team, and he doesn't seem to be afraid to go out and have kids say no to him.
Yeah, well, when you said interesting moves, I thought you were talking first about the photo with Bill Clinton that showed up on his Twitter page today. No, at a Pitt alumni gathering in New York City, Grant Hill, his former Duke or partner at Duke, I think Hill left, they might have overlapped 1 year, played together. But
Detroit Piston, great, by the way.
Oh yeah. Well, you know what? That would make sense with the Clinton thing, because the Arkansas tie-in, that was that team that lost to Arkansas in the final. It all makes sense now. But yeah, Capel is really hitting the circuit hard in terms of getting not only recruits, but trying to get the Pitt brand out there and the Pitt name. I mean, even in those photos, he had a little script Pitt pin that he had Grant Hill wearing in the photos and everything. He's trying to bolster the reputation of the program. Which, I mean, we're talking about a team that they were a #1 seed in the tournament less than a decade ago, so it's not like Pitt is unknown to people, but just over the last couple of years, I think Jeff Capel's doing a great job coming in and just sort of, the bad light that was shown on the program the last couple of years, he's trying to get all of that away real quick.
Well, and I think that what you have to also do as a coach, as I mentioned, you can't be afraid to have a kid say no to you. You don't get that, you don't get that opportunity unless you make the offer. And so he's going after some 5-star kids, some 4-star kids that maybe the previous coaching staffs wouldn't have gone after. Maybe they would inquire, we probably can't get that kid. Well, again, you don't know unless you make the effort.
Yeah, and in Trey McGowan's, who was his first commitment that's coming up for this next school year from Hargrave Military Academy, he was a 4-star kid, ranked as high by some of the services, the number 80 player in the country for this class. And, Capel and McGowan's really seem to have connected, and McGowan's now even is, you can see him on social media sort of talking to these other kids. It snowballs.
You get the one kid, and then it's like the Fab Five at Michigan.
It's a small.
You get the one, and then the rest follow.
It's such a small world when you talk about all these kids know each other from playing AAU circuit,
the McDonald's All-Star games, all that
they
stuff.
communicate, especially in the social media era. They communicate, and when people see a good thing starting to get going, who doesn't want to get in on the ground floor? And I think that is sort of the impression that Jeff Capel is giving to these kids. It's like, hey, you can get in right at the start of something good. And, more power to him. Would love to see the wins on the court, but he's taking that right first step.
Now, Matt, over the weekend, you were in Rochester, New York, covering the Riverhounds against Toronto.
I know, confusing, right?
That's the way it goes on some minor league sports.
Yeah, it is, and what the reason for it being, of course, the Rochester Rhinos, where the Riverhounds coach Bob Lilly and some of his players, came from after they're taking a year off to sort of financially reorganize. The league is putting some games there to just fill the stadium a little bit, and when I say fill, I use that a little loosely. But
keep the fan base happy.
The Hounds drew, more than 1,000 there, which was more than I thought would come for two teams in a neutral venue. But got a win, 2-1, undefeated on the season. They're the last undefeated team in the USL, 4 wins, 3 draws, and they're going into a stretch now where it's going to be coming fast and furious for them. They have up to 8 games over the next 26 days, depending on if they can keep winning in the U.S. Open Cup, which, of course, that's what everybody really wants to see, because we remember how Highmark Stadium was packed when DC United came here 3 years ago. That's the kind of selling point that the Riverhounds as a franchise want to get. And I mean, for someone like you who doesn't really follow it too much, that's the kind of thing, though, that's going to get your attention. If you can get that matchup with an MLS team, bring them to town here.
Yeah, because you always want to see how the teams measure up against the teams that you've actually heard of, or the teams that have that history. It's kind of like when Robert Morris played Kentucky.
Yeah.
It's very similar to that in that, wow, okay, so you get to see that matchup. How do they, you see a team that's playing well or doing well. Okay, well, how would they play against? It's very much like the English soccer league, where the team gets moved up, and you say, okay, how will they fare against that team from the upper tier?
And I think that's a good point you bring up about the sort of Robert Morris Kentucky comparison, because when you see these teams on the field, you realize the gap in talent from the MLS to USL, it really isn't that big, and it's getting smaller every year. It used to be, maybe late 90s, early 2000s, that was a much bigger gap, as MLS was a brand new league, a lot of excitement around it. Now, as soccer has grown here, there's more teams, more money going into the USL is the biggest thing, and the gap is getting smaller. And if the Riverhounds could make a run, that's going to do more than just about anything else they could do to raise the profile of the club. And we're saving the best for last with Dale here. We got to talk a little bit of Steelers. The new NFL calendar year is well in play. We're past the draft. And now rookie camp, right? We got that first action coming on the field this weekend.
Yeah, this kicks off everything. The Steelers will open up their rookie mini camp. It's kind of an orientation period.
Yeah.
They'll get the young guys on the field for the first time and get a chance to take a look at them. They'll bring in some guys for tryouts as well that may or may not make it. Some guys that have made it in the past. Terrence Garvin was a guy who came in on an invite and ended up making the roster and is still in the league. So it can happen for those guys. So this will be an opportunity for the coaching staff to come in, get these rookies on the field, see what they can do, see how quickly they can acclimate to things, the biggest thing. And then next week, they'll start the OTAs with the veterans mixed in as well. So we're getting to that period of time now where ironically, as the Penguins season ends, the Steelers season kind of actually starts to kick off.
Now, how much do these rookies really get in this first weekend thrown at them? I mean, is it more, I'm sure it's a lot of off-field stuff in terms of, I know they have those sort of seminars and just lifestyle things, because these kids are getting big $1 million contracts for the first time in their life. So what are some of the things other than the on the field that they really get thrown at them this week?
Like you mentioned, there'll be some showing around the facility. Where's everything at? Who do I go to get this equipment? Where do I go to get that? Who do I need to talk to about getting an apartment, getting set up in town? Because it's only been a couple of weeks since the draft. These guys are basically coming in now. They're going to be living here from here on out. So you have to get a lot of things like that set up. That's why the Steelers also bring in some veteran guys. And when I say veteran guys who at least were here last year, a first or second year guy, just to kind of get them set up in the drills. I mean, just to show you here's how we do things. When we do this drill, this is how we're looking to run it, and here's the pecking order. There's always a pecking order in terms of who goes first in the drills and those kind of things. So there's always those little things like that. And oh, by the way, they will have the playbook thrown at them, and they'll now it's time where you start seeing what sticks and what doesn't stick, and see who learns quickly and who doesn't. And that's a big part, especially for some of those undrafted guys. If you can't pick up the playbook quickly, you're not going to be here very long.
Yeah, that's it. People seem to forget that they're not just making a football adjustment, but this is just like anyone who graduates from college, going out for your first job, getting your first apartment off campus, something like that. It's all of that at once.
This is a lengthy job interview.
Yeah.
You haven't made the team. You haven't made it until they cut down to that 53-man roster. That's when you've officially gotten the job. Yeah. This is about a 5-month-long or 4-month-long, basically, job interview.
Dale, I'm glad you guys didn't make me go through one that long when I showed up here.